Everybody, I'm back with another installment here of my videos, and I thought in this video I've been working on a Blazor ChatGPT Dalle2 image creation Blazor app that I sent out another video. The previous video I sent out to YouTube was covering that one in fairly large detail. So in this video, I just want to do a follow-up, and it's a few days later now. I've been banging my head enough in the wall trying to figure out stuff, but I just want to share you with a couple of things that I discovered that caused a lot of my grief, and I still don't have necessarily the solutions to them, but I want to point out a few things that I wasn't able to do in the previous video that I kind of know exactly where to look at least. So I want to cover those in this video. It's not going to be a long one, and I'll also point out a couple of references for you, so in case you want to continue doing some Blazor work, that would be a good place to start. So let's take a look at them and go through them. Okay, so I'm gonna fire up the Blazor app that I have here. So let me load that, and it will probably load in Edge, I assume. Yeah. So as you can see, it's loading up, and here is my app, and you've probably seen this before if you saw my previous video. It's a little bit about OpenAI, and I won't explain it here. Go and see my previous video about ChatGPT and DALL-E 2 in Blazor. Then we'll cover all this stuff. But what I wanted to show you today is a couple of things that I discovered. So if I go to my ChatGPT here and I load up the actual page, you can see now it's a little better styling than I had last time, because I had such a problems with CSS, and you know, all this formatting is driving me insane. But here I got a toolbar that has some shades, and I've styled up the buttons a little bit and so forth. I had some of this before, but it wasn't working, so it looked terrible. But we can ask a question like, now let me point out right now that what I do here now is not talking to OpenAI, because my account ran out. So it ran out on April 1st, so a couple of days back, but I hard-coded in a list box behind this so you can at least see the effect of it. That's what I'm trying to do. So right now I'm looking at ChatGPT 1, which is one of my experimental pages. So let's click send, and as you can see, it's not what I expected. You can see I'm getting some big images here, and I'm getting some white text. It doesn't look good. So why is that? Why isn't it working? Why isn't my styling work? Well, what I did eventually figure it out. I went to this inspect page. Now I'm in Edge here, but if you go into the inspector, like right click and say inspect, and you're in here and you click this top left button, then hone in on the element you're looking for. Here's the image, and here is the paragraph, and when you click, you can see over here it selects that element. So what I went in and did through my JavaScript code, which is what I had before, I create this list element. And if you look, it's a list element that I embed into an image and a paragraph, which is basically the question and the answer from ChatGPT. And here's the end of the list item. So as you can see, I have a message left, which represents the question, and that means the image should be pushed onto the left. And I have a list item with a message right. That's where the answer from ChatGPT should show up. So as you can see here, that's where the text comes in. It doesn't format, and why is that? Well, when I look here, and this is what drove me crazy before. I said that 60% of my time was spent on just trying to get the CSS to work. Well, what I discovered was there is this little GUI, B-KFOX5, whatever it is. And here I see it too, on this UL element. And on my list, I don't have it. On my image, I don't have it. So why is that? What is that? Well, as it turns out, and this is written somewhere in the documentation, and I don't know exactly where it is right now, but it's basically an identifier for Blazor to figure out what has changed. And in my case, it hasn't changed according to Blazor. The obvious point is to how do I create that inside my code? Well, I tried many different ways and I could never get it to work. But let me show you something just so you have an idea that why this particular identifier is important. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back and I'm going to drag out my code. And if you recall from the previous video, I have this helper JavaScript class. And the two main things for this one is that it's going to create a question and push it up onto the chat panel. And it's going to create an answer that comes from ChatGPT. What I had to do, and I discovered this, but just hard force it in basically. I add to the list an attribute for whatever that code is. And I think the code that Blazor uses is per page, I think, or per application. I'm not quite sure. So if I comment out these here, here, and here. So one for the list element, one for the image element, and then one for paragraph element. And let's only do it for the question. So let me save it and refresh it. And if I minimize this now and go back to my page here, and I type in anything, because I just have it hard-coded, the French press does. So let me just write this something quick here. And as you can see now, it formatted the question quite nicely. You see that? Now it has the shade and has the rounded figures, put a little image to the left. But this one didn't work, okay? So let's go back and let's try to finish it off and see what we can do. And let's comment this out. And let's take this out. And let's take the last one out, which is this one, I believe. Okay, let's save this. And let's refresh. And let's go back. And let's write it again. Anything, because I have a question answer behind the scene. And notice now, it works just fine. And you can see it types it out word for word, because that's what that JavaScript is able to do. But look now how much nicer format it is. And of course, you can change the theme and you can see what it will look like. The buttons and everything change. You can see it in green. Okay. It still has some work to do. You can see the rounded shade here is in black on the top, but kind of lighter on the bottom. Same with the buttons is the opposite. So I still haven't gotten it, really clean. And here's the red theme. And of course, the very light theme looks like this. So yeah, because of that little refresher issue, I was not able to display the CSS, and that drove me crazy. But one other thing I will point out here is that if you look at my construct on my pages, if you look at these pages down here, I have, not for the info pages, but for example, this one. You notice I have, this is the main page, ChatGPT-1 Razor. And then I have a ChatGPT-1 Razor CS and a ChatGPT-1 Razor CSS. Now, those are pages that are dependencies of the main page. So they're children of the main page. And therefore, in Blazor, you're able to selectively use this style sheet for this page. So each one of these style sheets will go to the page. So that way, that's a nice thing because it doesn't get so conflicted with other pages. And in case you want to see how that renders into it, this CSS isolation, you can see that in the Blazor documentation here for ASP Core. The Razor component, which can simplify CSS and avoid collision with other components. So in other words, to define a component-specific style, create a razor.css file matching the name of the Razor file. And that's exactly what I'm doing here, as you can see. Here's the Razor file, and then this is the CSS file that matches that name. Here is the code behind file, because when I have a lot of code, I put it in the code behind. If I don't have a lot of code, I just put it right inside the main file. So here you can see it's inside the main file. Another thing in this project now, I'm going to dump it out on the GitHub repository and have you go at it. But think of this project not as a finished project you can just start and run. Think of it as a car wreck and you want to just go in and grab parts from it, because that's kind of how you want to look at this project. So in case you want to steal some code here and there, that's fine. But I don't think this project is going to serve you very well if you just try fire it up and run it. So keep that in mind when you look at this project. Notice also I have some references here to other pages that I tested out with some different things in them. And I included those here, as you can see. I tried different things. Some of them work, others don't. Some of them I commented out and others are not. So play around with it and see what happens. Because one thing I was trying to do was trying to figure out a way of actually running the code in a C# and have it go word by word. And you can see my struggles right here, how I tried to do that. Now, I showed you one page that went word to word, but I also want to show you my test page. And the reason I want to show you my test page is because that one is not going word to word, but it's not using JavaScript. I have this test page I created. So let me click on that one. And it looks like this. As you can see, it loads right away. You can see it's nicely formatted, but it's flushed onto the screen. I tried to make it work with the word-for-word stuff, but then you have to basically do a lot of work because you have to load the first question and answers. And if you have 3 or 4 of them already, you only want to kind of script out the last one and you want to flush it down on the screen and so forth. So there's a lot of work, but I was messing around to try to get it to work. But here you can see the actual C# code that I worked with to make this happen. So here's this test page, the test razor page. And if you scroll down here, here's my code behind. And I basically create a list of this type, which is this class down here. So that's a role and content. And then I just initialize it here and set up a new list object here. And then I add the range of this type, and in here I create like a new one here with a role as user, and the content is basically all the text I want to use. And notice it's already in like HTML format here, so chances are if you get it from OpenAI, it will have like /n or /r, meaning new line or return character. And if you're going to use this method here with this markup string that I'm using up here, this method here for the paragraph from each item's content, you flag it as a markup string, and therefore it will display it correctly using HTML embedded elements. So for example, if you get the string back and you have a bunch of -n's indicating new line, new line, new line, and something like that, just replace the string with a /n or /r is a BR, like a less than BR, greater than BR type of thing. So a break point, in other words. And if you do that, this one will fix it for you and lay it out nicely so you get those breaks in the text. So that's what I'm doing here. But you basically have a for each loop over that list box that I created down on the bottom here. So it loops 4 times. So each one of these is an item, and I'm grabbing the role and I'm grabbing the content up here, as you can see. And you basically decorate it with the, so inside the UL element here, I'm going to create list elements. So here you can see I'm creating a list elements, and I'm set the class here now. So that's why I recognize the class, and unlike what I did with the JavaScript, in this case, it will recognize that it's a new element, and it will, style it with this class. Actually, these 2 classes, because if you remember, these classes comes from my CSS. So as you can see, here's the logo, message, my chat or my chat container, and of course I have those variables that are pointing back to my app CSS, which has this type of thing, where I have like variables. So if you recall, in my previous, under my root directory, under the CSS, there is this app CSS, and these are representing the themes in the application. And again, if you want more explanation on how that happened, make sure you check out my previous video on this particular app. But here is where you set all the themes, and then you can simply refer to them in those variables on each of these sub CSS sheets, like I'm doing here for the button image right here. So this one will pick up the button image depending on which theme you're on. If you remember here, if I'm in this blue, it will pick up background text box from this one. If I'm on green, it will pick up this one, and so forth. So it's dynamic. So that is helpful when you have these kind of pages. So that's what that one is doing here. So anyways, it picks up on this stuff here, and if you recall down up here, this is where I'm setting the message left and the message right. So it tells you just how much padding you're using, and we're using something called flex here, like a flex grid in this container. And so you can see here is the chat is flex. Okay, enough of that. That's how I lay it out. So I do a loop, and I say if it's a user, do this, meaning put it to the left. Else, meaning it's an answer coming, supposedly come from ChatGPT. Then you make it a right class, and you put the image in for the answer here inside the list element, and you have a markup string with the item content here. So that's kind of how that works. And then I was trying to do this dynamically, where you loop through it and try to basically do it word for word. But this is just in part here because I couldn't get the sync and the weight stuff to work. So I just want to point out that if you want more details about Blazor, you should probably just do a Google search. The one you want to go to is probably this core Blazor page here. And when you go there, you end up here, and there is a section for Blazor right here, and you have some other information about Razor pages, etc., and ASP.NET Core. You can read through this, and you probably should. I haven't had time to read through this yet, but as I try to troubleshoot this stuff, I try to go in and figure out some stuff. A couple of pages that I think is important is this rendering, because when you work with the JavaScript, it doesn't always render for me. And I tried a lot of different tricks here to make it work, but I haven't been able to do it so far. And it could be because it's the JavaScript. If I do bind variables, etc., and set it up inside the C# or the Razor pages, I don't have a problem with this. But it's when I trigger this JavaScript interrupt and it comes back and I want to refresh the page, it doesn't work. As you can see here, there is this section about rendering, and well, I want to point out obviously you want to read the page here so you get the understanding. There is something called should render, meaning you can suppress refreshing if you want to, if you don't want to refresh it necessarily. And as you can see here in this input box, text box, they create a bind variable and they're calling this function here. And if you look down here, you can see this is the function, and all it does is return this variable should render. And it's a Boolean return, as you can see. And that is always set to true, as you can see here. So you can force the rendering this way. That's one method. The other method they pointed out here is the state has changed. And this is the one I tried with async. And after reading a little more carefully, as you can see here, you can trigger this state has changed. Manually, you can see here, you can trigger it to make the update. And in this case, they're using the current count, like that page they have in each project. Here you can see they set up this current count method, but it says that you should do this inside or after the task. So let me see what the exact wording is. And it's important to read this. It says that component base can only trigger rendering when the task is first returned and when the task finally completes. So make sure you read this carefully. It also talks about async and using the state changed. But you should be able to fire off a rendering refresh here by using this state has changed. I also encourage you, if you're interested in learning more about Blazor, they have tutorials on this learnmicrosoft.com, as you can see up here at this link. And I'll put that link down in the description for this video. So just another thing I want to point out, that you can, in case something doesn't happen and you want scratching your head and wonder what's going on, in addition to the code, when we put breakpoints and stuff, you should also use the inspect option on your browser. So as you can see here, I'm pointing to my ChatGPT page, and that ChatGPT will call the OpenAI library. So if you look here, I'm inside ChatGPT, and if I just type anything here, just something simple, and then I send it to OpenAI, you can see the question pops up, but nothing happens. So you start wondering, is it still doing anything or whatever? So what I urge you to do in situations like that is simply right click on your web browser. This is Chrome here. Click on inspect. And if you look over inspect, and I enhance the size of this so you can read it easier. If you go to the console, you can see here, failed to load resource to the server, and it gives you a status. But below here you can see you exceeded your current quota. Please check your plan and billing details. So this tells me when I went into my account, it told me that it was, as of April 1st, it was shut down. Even though I used only $6.48 out of my 20 allotted. Make sure you check with your OpenAI account and make sure that your token stays fresh too. My token is sitting inside the app settings JSON here, as you can see. So I'll blur out this token. This is my key right here, as you can see. So that's the one I'm referencing in my code to get a hold of. And I get that from the initial load here somewhere. Let me see if I can find the code for it. So to set up your API key, if you use the app settings JSON file like I showed you, inside your code, you know, when you actually call your class here, as you can see here, you declare a variable for it, like I do here, a private string. And then you also need to get a hold of it. So I set up a reference to the configuration based on the I configuration. Once you have that set up here, you simply refer to that and you say get value as a string, and then you refer to the key of app settings, this one here, the OpenAI key. Then it's just a matter of referencing this variable when you set up your call to OpenAI, which you can see I'm doing right here when I create my OpenAI service object. So that's how you gotta set up the API key with your token in it. So I just want to mention that. And also the app here now, like I said, is car wreck, and you can take parts from it if you need to use it in own app. So again, I just wanted to share some of these things with you, and I hope you like that, and I will see you soon. Thanks.